Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this July 3rd edition of Virtual Breakfast. I'm Jenna Thaler. I'm a field crops educator over in the Thumb region. Joining us as our specialist this morning is Chris DiFonzo. We're going to talk all things insects today. So, with that, we're going to welcome Dr. Chris DiFonzo, who is a professor of field crops and field crops entomologist. Oh, Chris, I am slaughtering your title this morning.
Okay, so the way that I usually handle this is I go over things that I've gotten questions about in the last month or so, and then I'll start in on newer topics. So recent identifications, calls, questions, things like that. And now my screen won't move. There we go. So last year we had a lot of slug issues, uh, and especially in beans. And metaldehyde, which is our pretty decent slug bait, is registered on corn, but when you look at the label, it says you can't use it on soybeans in Michigan. If you were across the border in Ohio, you can, but you can't do it in Michigan. So I proceeded to try to do a special local needs label, which they do have in Kentucky. And that involves working with MDARD and working with the manufacturer. And MDARD was kind of on board. And it took a long time to get through the manufacturer, all summer essentially into the fall, even into the early winter. And by the time we did all of that, the manufacturer decided essentially not to proceed with the special local needs for Michigan. And this is what they actually said, that they are developing a residue data set to expand the federal label to include use on beans. So that's good. We eventually could get use on beans. But there is, quote, regulatory uncertainty, whatever that means. And so they decided to hold off supporting the special local needs. So you can't proceed with that unless the company is on board. So in the fall, I will call AMVAC again and see if where that sits, and we can see if eventually that label is going to change, or we can get a special local needs registration. We had a few more slug problems this year, so it is something that we probably need to resolve at some point. I got a call from Southwest Michigan, which is always a hotbed of gossipy, conspiracy theory types of things. And people were talking about that they saw stand loss in early planted corn. And instead of it perhaps being seed corn maggot, they're thinking maybe it's actually the seed treatment itself, that the seed treatment itself physically did something to the seed lot, and then the seed lot didn't come up. And I got asked, what do I think? Here we go. Very slow today. Zoom is very slow. So these factors on my list here make you think that you have seed corn maggot. You had tillage, you had green stuff that you tilled into the soil. Maybe you were on muck ground. You planted early. By early beans, I mean in April. You planted during the time when the flies fly, which would be mid to end of April in that part of the world. And you had some cool temperatures that maybe delayed emergence. If you have those kind of combination of things, or some of those things, I would lean that is seed corn maggot. If it's early enough, like May, you should see signs and symptoms. You should see the scarring on cotyledons of plants that did make it out of the ground, or some bending or twisting. You might even see some larvae and pupae still there. If there is nothing at all left, I mean, if we're talking, it might be too late to see any of these things. If it's June, things have decayed, things are gone, and you can't see these kind of signs and symptoms. Other things it could be, cranes, a big group of cranes can come in and they will pick seed out of the ground, and there'll be nothing left in a huge area. You should see tracks, but if it rained, the dinosaur tracks would be gone. Marty Chilvers is on. Sometimes there are pathogens that can come in and rot the seed under some of the same conditions that you'd have maggots. Kind of that cool weather, uh, early planting. Again, I think you'd see some plants that made it out of the ground. Could it be the seed treatment? In the past, when seed treatments weren't very good and sometimes they were put on too heavy, we did see occasionally a stand effect, especially in corn. If you had old seed, last year's seed that was seed treated, I could see how that stand could be reduced, or damaged seed. I just don't see that the physical seed treatment itself. I mean, it's meant to be put on seed early. I can't see that is actually causing damage or harm to the seed itself so that you don't get emergence across a big area. The better explanation is that seed treatments are not magic. When they're on the seed, they can affect moderate populations of pathogens and insects, but under higher populations or ideal conditions for the pathogen or the insect, they just don't work as well, and sometimes they fail. So I would tend to blame something else and not the physical seed treatment itself as being the cause of that stand loss. And it's July, and it's hard for us to tell at this point. Here's another question I got. Someone saw a lot of little things flying around as they were in their wheat, and they were worried that it was something damaging. And it turns out, if you look really close, these are midges. They're the non-biting midges. They're common. Their larvae eat schmutzy stuff, or they're in the water or whatever, and they can come out in mass emergencies and fly around, yeah, as you're harvesting or as you're walking through fields. So these aren't anything bad. They don't bite. They're just kind of there. Another question I got, I had this picture set in. I'm sorry if you can't see the picture if you're on your phone at the lake. What you're seeing are some plants where the whorl is kind of tilted over. There's some twisting and a little yellowing. And there's a lot of these plants in the row. It's like down the row. And the question was, is this stink bug injury? Now, it's true, there are a few stink bugs that overwinter as adults. Some of the brown stink bugs and the one spotted, they would be present early. And the way that you would get stink bug injury on emerging corn would be as if you had an open seed slot and the seedlings coming up, and they can get to that seedling early. Or if you had rye cover crop or a lot of Christy Sprague's weeds that then you go in and kill, and the insects then have nothing to feed on, and they move to the corn and kind of hammer that whorl and feed and begin to probe into it. Now let me show you a real picture of stink bug damage. Again, if you're at the lake, you can't see this, but what actually happens is they feed in or through the whorl. The poking of their mouth part creates an area of almost like dead or dying tissue. And as the whorl expands, you get these elongated holes with a yellowing around them. It's very distinctive. This is actually taken on campus a few years ago in one of the weed science weed day trials, and you can see the killed weeds that have been sprayed out as part of that program. So there's a lot of weeds there, and those things moved on to the corn early. So what the picture I was sent, I did not believe it was stink bug damage. I believe the picture I'm showing you here is stink bug damage because of the poke holes and the yellowing and the weeds being there. So if you ever see this, it's pretty distinctive. Another question, this may be my final question, is I've got a few calls and just people commenting, am I seeing a lot of fireflies this year? Yes, I am. More than normal. I mean, probably one of the biggest years that I've ever had. Right about dusk, there's just a ton of them out there. Nothing to be concerned about. The larvae overwinter in the ground over the winter. They're predators, so the adults you see now were larvae last year. They were eating slugs and other insects, so they're beneficial biocontrol. And most of the adults are usually predators too, or they eat pollen. So just enjoy them, don't spray them, let them go. Things for the future. Western bean cutworm flight has started. The trapping network has the information that shows the current counts, and this is the map as of yesterday. So I've caught just 3 on campus total. You can see a little bit bigger catch down there in Ohio because they're a little bit further ahead, and then up into Ontario. So the flight is starting. This is the time to put out your trap or just keep watching this network. If you're in corn, you're looking for the peak catch, a big catch to start scouting, and you're going to aim for your pre-tassel fields. And if you're a dry bean grower, you're looking for the intensity of catch in your local area, which is about 120 to 150 in a trap. And that would be the sweet spot to spray your dry beans. So, typically 3rd week of July, maybe 4th week into early August. So it's starting right on time. The flight's starting right on time. Soybean aphids are also present, starting right on time. We haven't had an aphid outbreak in this area since 2007. I mean, like a wide outbreak. And that's because biological control does its job. And in fact, when I found aphids yesterday at the Saginaw farm, I found parasitized aphids as well already. Growers, you guys in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Ontario, you guys are doing an awesome job because you don't just spray for no reason like they do in the West, out in the Dakotas and such. You follow that 250 threshold. If you want to count, knock yourself out. But what it looks like is the picture I'm showing on the screen. You've got the top of your plant covered with big, juicy, Mountain Dew looking like aphids. They look really healthy. They're green, they're fat, they're happy. And every plant is like that. And that is essentially probably a 250 threshold. You don't even have to spray right away. You can wait probably 5 days to see what's going to happen and then pull the trigger. Don't pull the trigger if you don't have to. Don't add cheap insecticides into your spray tank. The people that did this in the West, they can't use pyrethroids anymore to control soybean aphids, and they've had to move on to more expensive products. So we don't want to be them. We want to be better. And we've done an awesome job in holding back and not spraying when we didn't have to, and we don't have the outbreaks that they see in the West. Okay, a final thing, maybe this is final, is a new threshold for soybeans for defoliation. Our old threshold, people complained about it. They said it was old. It was 40% the vegetative stage for everything that's eating your beans, beetles and caterpillars and such. And then in R1 to R5, it popped down to 15%. And growers commented, well, the thresholds were developed in the 80s, so we have new pests. Maybe we have more defoliation. We have different genetics. Our costs are. Can we have a threshold that everybody can agree on across the region? So your checkoff dollars, the North Central Soybean Program, funded and the 7 states to get together last few years and redo those thresholds. So we grid sampled, we asked people, tell us where you see bad defoliation. Give us bad fields, like the worst that you might think about spraying. We did that, and this isn't just 10 fields. I think there's close to 70 or 80 fields over this period that we did the research in. It was across 7 states. We measured defoliation on a very careful grid, like a 1 acre grid. We took sweeps to see what was there. We used visual and software estimates of defoliation. And then the thresholds got recalculated based on new costs, a wider range of yield, and then higher and different commodity prices ranging from 6 to 18 bushels. So this has been finished. Has defoliation increased? Like we have Japanese beetle, for instance, now that maybe wasn't in the system back in the 80s. The average defoliation across all these states was only 3%. That's pretty low. And the defoliation is usually patchy. It's usually worse along the edge, so it looks bad. Based on all those fancy calculations that I didn't do because I'm too stupid, I just did the sampling part, but the smarter people redid the thresholds. And so to V1 to R2, when plants can compensate for loss, it came out to be a 30%. So that's shifted down a little bit. During R3 to R5, which is your sweet spot when soybean is probably most susceptible to yield loss, then you use a 10%, and then R6, 15%, and after R6, you wouldn't spray. This doesn't account for pod feeding, which you can get with bean leaf beetle. But from a defoliation standpoint, the numbers aren't too different from what we had before. And to be frank, we almost never reach these numbers if you do your sampling properly. So in the new and updated guide, if I'm reaching for my guide, our field crops guide, these new thresholds will be put in there as well as an easier scouting method. This is my final slide because it's in the news and it's corn leafhopper. This is a tropical insect. It's native to corn, so it's present in Mexico, Central and South America. It can't live here over the winter. Um, it had a big outbreak last year in the US where it moved up into Texas and some of the southern states. We actually found it in a few of the suction traps in the north that we use for aphids. So it was found as far north as Illinois late in the season. It sucks on plants. It poops out honeydew, and then you get sooty mold. But the more important thing is, it's a disease vector. It will can transmit an aggressive complex of viruses and bacteria that together make a disease called red stunt. So the pictures on the screen show the reddening and death of leaves and plants, the poor ear fill. So this is a big concern in the southern U.S. Currently, this insect has moved up this season to the top of Texas. There may be some fellows spraying there because they have some disease pressure, but it is only really a problem in the V stages, like up through tasseling. By the time this would get to Michigan, I think it would be too late in the season to contribute to this red stunt issue in regular corn. I bring it up because you listen to podcasts and you see farm shows and you might hear about it, but it is not something that that I'm particularly worried about. Just kind of keep your eye on it. And every now and then, I don't know if he's on, my Texas colleague sometimes is on the breakfast. And if we had, more questions, certainly we could probably get those answered. But I'm not too worried about this. I think we have other things to worry about, but it is something to just keep on your radar screen. So with that, the insect management guide is currently being updated. I'm hoping to have it find a way to print it so we can give it out in fall and winter. And that pheromone trap network, Great Lakes and Maritimes Pest Monitoring Network, is up and running. It should say 2025, and that has all the pheromone trap catches. So I think that's my last slide, and I will stop my share. How's that, Jenna?
Fantastic. As
Okay.
always, Chris. So we have a few questions in the chat. If you have any more, please drop them in as we go because we tried to have a lot of good information during this time and you don't want me pulling questions out of my sleeves. So please put your questions in there so you aren't filled with random stuff that maybe you didn't have an interest in. First question we have is for you, Chris. Are defoliation threshold numbers the same for dry beans as for soybeans?
Sort of. So the defoliation threshold for dry bean on the whole thing is 15%. That would be similar to the new soybean threshold that is in that R stage, the most critical. It's kind of a 15%, kind of thing. And then I think the second question was, have our leafhoppers here? And yes, they would come at the end of May, typically third week of May, and they're coming a little earlier each year. I blame Jeff because his weather systems move them. So they are here, and I would be scouting, after 4th of July, that'd be time to go scout. And the threshold is one per leaf, the trifoliate leaf, and it doesn't matter if it's a nymph or an adult. The nymphs stay put when you pick the leaf. Those adults kind of pop off, so you have to look close on for that. And I
Absolutely.
think there was one more question for me about an organic product called Entrust. For most of you don't even know what that is. It is a product sold a couple different ways, but it's got spinosad and it's labeled for organic production. And the question was, is there resistance happening to this product? Is it losing efficacy? And it doesn't matter if an insecticide is conventional or not. If you used it a lot in one place and relied on it a lot, and those insects overwinter locally, you could get resistant populations building. This isn't a product that I have specific experience with. Again, it's mostly in organic production. The last thing I would say is some of these products, and Entrust is one of them, it has to be targeted on a specific insect life stage. It has to be targeted early. So if you have weather conditions or an environment where the insect egg laying is extended, it's not just happening in a week, maybe it's extended over 3 weeks or something, it can be really hard to target that kind of product. Even a BT is like that. It's got to be really targeted on those very young insects. And if you miss that time frame, it can look like maybe you have resistance because they're survivors, but it's because you just didn't hit the right sweet spot in that life cycle. So I'm
Perfect.
I'm getting my I'm dancing around it to say I don't know. Is what I'm saying about trust.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. So, Dean, on that, if you want to shoot me an email, I did just email my organic counterpart down in at Purdue to see if she has heard anything.
Yes, and that'd be a good idea.
So if you want to either drop your contact or whatnot, so I can get a hold of you when I get an answer from Purdue, I would appreciate it. Otherwise, we can try to make sure we give that update next week on here. Um, but thank you for the question. So Clay had a question for Dr. Andreessen. So he says, I have been asked if the federal administration has removed information from any, perhaps three, weather, quote unquote, satellites from public availability. Is this true?
Uh, it actually is technically true at this point. There have been some satellite products that have been discontinued. One in particular was from the Defense Department that was used by NOAA, and that no longer is available. There may be more of these in the future. I know that there is an attempt here with this reorganization and restructuring to try and keep basic data services, but in some cases, some of it will be lost. And so there are certainly issues and more I'm sure will unfold. But as of right now, yes, we have lost a couple of the satellite products that were available before.
Thank you. Another one for you, Jeff. With wheat harvest close within a week, are we going to get a dry spell for harvest, or are we going to
Yeah.
be dodging storms and dealing with sprouting and fall issues and falling numbers?
Right. It's a great question and a very obviously very timely one. There's some good and not as good. I guess I think the good news is in general, we're looking at, especially for the upcoming week, most of the upcoming week, we're looking at I think some good opportunities. And with warm and dry conditions, we should have actually very well controllable type of circumstances. But that said, we are also looking at maybe a period later next week, and this goes into that medium range forecast time frame, where there would be maybe small chances for precipitation each day. And of course, that makes everyone's life a little bit more edgy than what we would like, especially with harvest. But there will be certainly a threat. But again, I think on the best part of this is that the forecast is the preset probably, at least for the upcoming week, is going to be below normal. So that the chances for precip, at least in the next week, will be limited. So hopefully people can get a good start or continue. I know we have started, and it should be really good conditions, drying conditions, and again something that's easily manageable. So I'm crossing fingers. It looks, I think, somewhat favorable at this point in time overall, more favorable than not.
All right, perfect. Trying to scroll through, we have a lot of things here. Lyndon says that he dropped the link in case you're looking for the weekly irrigation scheduling recommendations. That link is in the chat. Chris also dropped the link in case you want the Western bean cutworm trap catches the network there. It's a very long, unwieldy link, but favorite it, then you never have to find it again. That being said, I will tell you guys there are traps up in a few up here in the thumb that are not on the map yet. That will be getting added here later today. They do have counts on them for the past 2 weeks. We just haven't put them out on the website. Dean's question, which you already answered. David says deer damage is way out of control. There needs to be a bounty put on deer. We agree, David. They are out of control, as are the woodchucks, as Chris mentioned down on campus and about everywhere else. We do have some deer damage monitoring things and whatnot going on as well, David. We're trying to help you guys out. So we can put some data behind it for purposes. Um, Other than that, we are out of questions. So if you have any more questions for them, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I also see, is somebody trying to talk?
Oh, it's Jenna, it's Christy. Sorry, I was just going to make a couple comments.
I was about to throw it to you anyhow, Christy.
Okay. Yeah. So probably most of you have seen that there's been probably a little bit more crop response from some of our post herbicide applications this last couple of weeks. I would say a majority of that is probably cosmetic. As things start to grow, the new trifoliates and stuff are coming out okay. Just with the hot temperatures, especially as we add more things to the mix. So there was some stuff that we just sprayed last, probably within 5 days. And pretty much, as you add more things, like if you're adding your residuals in, or if you're adding, just various different products, we start to see a little bit more crop response. But again, I think a lot of that is just going to be cosmetic. Soybeans have a tremendous ability to recover. So I wouldn't, a lot of times, kind of like when we're using a lot of like Cobras and Flex Stars and stuff, we'd say, hey, walk away for a week. I think things will start perking back up and looking okay. So as you're driving by and you start to see more brown fields or yellowing and things like that, a lot of that's going to come out of it. Another thing to just kind of keep in mind, we're kind of on that verge of limiting some of our post-emergence herbicide applications based on the growth stage of soybeans. So keep that in mind with the post-emergence products that you're applying.
All right, thank you, Christy. I see Marty is also on. Did you have any updates for us, Marty?
No real updates. Again, I was sent like a picture of TarSpot at the start, what we thought might have been TarSpot at the start of the week, but we haven't confirmed that yet. It didn't quite look right. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's out there, but in general, we want to hold those first fungicide sprays anyway to about the VT growth stage, depending on any disease pressure that might be there.
All right, thank you, Marty. If I'm missing any specialists, I was trying to go search your names really fast in the participants. So if there's any other specialists on who have anything that they want to say or educators, please feel free to chime in at this moment. All right, Eric Anderson, are you still on?
I am.
All right, I have a question for you. Up here in the thumb, people are starting to make some applications of Cobra to try to knock back their beans, thinking it's going to give them a better yield. You have any information on your belief of effectiveness of that? I don't know if you've done any trials or Mike had before you.
So we do have the Cobra trial where the Cobra is labeled for white mold suppression. I'll put it that way, and it would be going on right around now. The earliest planted fields that we've got are R1, approaching R2. If you've got beans that are, I'll just say, approaching R1, that'd be the time to do it. We're using the 6 ounce rate. As far as any results, we don't have any results. The 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 I'll say anecdotal information that we've got from years past is that if you have white mold, that Cobra application can be a yield bump for you. If you don't, then it actually could hit yield. And Christy could probably speak to that a little better than I could, but that's some of the information, but I would say it's not research data at this point.
All right, Christy, if you had anything to add, feel free to jump in on that.
Not really. I mean, it's just one of those things that, the more time you have for soybeans to recover, and usually that 6 ounce rate that people are using that's not going to be good for weed control. So as you're thinking about if you have to clean up weeds, you're probably going to need to increase that rate. And then most of the time we've done a lot of stuff where we looked at some later applications of those PPO inhibitors. And as long as we had good growing conditions to where they could recover, really never saw a yield hit.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. All righty. Chris, I know you already had a whole lot of time, but do you see anything else we should be watching for or maybe timing our scouts for coming through the season?
There we go. If you're in southern Michigan and you're interested in corn borer, you have some non-BT corn, this would be the time to scout. This is the time to do it. When you have a little bit of a whirl, that's a little easier. You're lucky to get, if you get corn borer, you want it to be first generation when you have like a whirl and not second generation when it's harder to scout. And there's some of the seed acres down there too. That's really the only thing that's sort of uh, I could see outside of Western bean cutworm. Just keep your eye on that, and we'll be scouting for that in a couple weeks.
All right, thank you. Lyndon, your hand's up.
David's question about deer, there make sure everyone's aware that the DNR does offer the deprivation permits for the summer right now, and that's very active. A lot of farms have received permits to remove female deer in season. They actually have a program where they're bringing a freezer out so that deer that have to be recovered, but they can go right into the freezer and into a donation program. So that's worked real well. And then if you really want to try to bring the population down, you start looking at the DMAP program, which happens during the hunting season, but allows you to get more does harvested. So both of those programs are up there. It's a hot topic in front of the legislature right now. So if you want to comment to them, that's a good idea. But use those programs. We all complain about deer. It's a little harder to do something about it.
Very true. Thank you, Lyndon, for bringing that up. We have a couple more questions that have come in. It says Cadet has a special use label in Michigan and possibly New York for white mold suppression. What is the efficacy of this herbicide for this use?
Jenna, was that question about Cobra?
It says Cadet.
Cadet. Christy, is that a PPO inhibitor as well?
Yeah, it is.
Yep. So I think we have some data on that too. So I think we've seen some suppression, but not as much as Cobra.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Jason asks if there's any news on head scab in wheat as harvest gets rolling. So again to you, Marty, because Dennis isn't on.
Yeah, no worries. I haven't heard much. Looking at the head scab risk model during flowering, we were generally at pretty low risk. There was a little blip of risk down in southwest Michigan and up on the east side of the thumb, but they are fairly small windows. So overall, I'd expect we should have pretty minimal head scab.
All right. Thank you. This is going to be my final call for any specialists or educators who have anything they want to get in. Oh, we have another comment. Somebody says they've been using deer management tags and have not seen effects. They shoot at least 40 deer every year, and they have plenty of damage to be seen. Christina, we know that. Yep, there's a lot. Anecdotally, we farm as well, and I have a friend who shot 40 off one field for 2 or 3 years straight. The populations are just very high. I think as of last October, last fall, the DNR was saying that Michigan was at 3 times its carrying capacity. So it is a very high number. I don't know if that number has changed since I last got that update, but we are very, very high. And I think it's finally made its point where the legislators are also starting to get attention to this a little bit more than before. All righty. Thank you, everybody, so much for attending today's edition, and we hope you have a great holiday weekend. Thank you, Chris and Jeff, for your excellent presentations as per normal.
And bring your questions for next week.
Yes, bring your questions for next week, because if you don't have questions, it's going to be a very boring week.